Kevin Johnson.
Afterwards, maybe. Yeah.
I've been blackballed more by more people today.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, I saw that on the computer.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to figure out what.
Who is Bandito? I believe you can't hear me. He just called me back.
Hi, Mary Catherine. I think that's who that was behind that match.
It's nice to see your eyes.
Is that senior on top of the brick wall? Wait, is that senior? John Senior on the?
No, it's not. It's not a cups project.
So this is everything that was in my.
Welcome and thank you for
Yes,
choosing
so
freeconferencecall.com.
The documents in there were
We're
included in the
people
original
of-
thing. I'm printing off. The only thing not in there is the agenda and the minutes.
If you are
Okay.
the
And then
host,
this
press
new
star
one
now.
is an
Please enter
outline.
your PIN followed by the
that was just
pound or
sent me today
hash.
to give out to everybody.
Who sent?
Thank you. You are
Who
the
sent
only
it?
participant
Who
in
sent the
the
letter?
conference.
Which?
You said there's a letter that was sent?
No. So this is all from the original email that I sent you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That had basically the packet for everything. These are the kind of like educational material stuff.
Okay.
And then the agenda for the meeting, and I'm doing the minutes right now.
Oh, okay.
And then this is just another email that Larry sent me with a follow-up kind of outline for tonight's meeting.
Okay.
Discussion stuff.
All right. Gotcha.
And Jen, I'll have masks for any of these.
Sure. Yeah. And here's some extra copies of the agenda for you.
So if I start talking, you're gonna turn the camera just like, so it's like really close. I'm just looking at the camera like this when I talk.
Let's see. I can get you on right now. That's Mike Maturkis. There's no one watching right now, so but it'll be recorded.
So, Mr. Nutricus, what do you think about them doing that?
So really, Mr. Maturkis, I really want to know the inside scoop. Are you running again?
Yeah.
Okay. We didn't get
I wouldn't
your
miss your shit for the world.
we didn't get your
I know I gotta do it.
25. Okay, find 25 people that like you.
When do I have to do that by?
I think July 21st.
Oh, fuck. Well, you better give it to me.
Yeah,
You gonna
Nick,
sign
see
it?
Nick, see Nick tomorrow or something. Or,
See you Nick tomorrow.
he has all that information.
25 people, huh? Pain in the
I think
ass.
you can just, You got some mystery. Come on, you can.
Well, the problem is that, oh, that's right, Leo can sign it. He's not rerunning it. Is he? Wait, is Leo rerunning again?
No, it's CCU and
Is he rerunning?
yeah, I think she said she wasn't Matt said using for us for mayor. So
Is that good rerun?
Yep.
He's uncontested right now, right?
I think so. Yeah. I haven't looked at the
No.
Nick has all the anyone that applied. I haven't heard of anyone else has applied for it. So
Maybe I'll run for mayor.
it's on camera. Can you say that again, Mike?
Maybe I'll run for mayor. It's Mayor Dyka. See, I like this camera angle. It's perfect.
Because you're
It's
not
all,
in it.
it's all him and none of me. Yep, there it is.
There it is. He is there.
You need one? You got one?
For when we're on camera. So I should have sent one of my line cooks in here today. They could have worn this and just sat here and said nothing. Nobody would have known the difference.
How you doing? Good, thank you.
This is copies of the minutes in case anybody.
Whoa. Could have been bad.
It could have been bad.
Could have been bad.
It's all right.
Make sure copies of the minutes. And some extras.
To you. Doo-doo.
What's Just wait for the elevator to come down.
This is the Sears Tower, or is it the Willis Tower now?
So I think George Pete and Andrew Bowman will be joining us via YouTube.
That's what they said, YouTuber call.
And then I think that Jack won't be at the meeting.
So
So
we may.
I just saw him about an hour ago walking down Main Street.
we recalled from the last meeting that we thought he had something going on this evening. You know,
Well, either way, we'll.
maybe if he's here, I'll grab his nameplate and I'll throw it out there.
I don't know anybody over 40 like you are. 42.
Does Lee Kramer ever show up, or is he always just?
Low light, you have trouble seeing.
He hasn't showed up recently. He's been calling in, but usually he shows up. I think he just might want to, because of the COVID stuff, stay home.
Oh, it's a pretty scary COVID-filled room.
Oh, this is what oh, I didn't even see that.
Hi, Victor.
Hey, Beth, how are you doing?
Good.
It's gotta be some of the worst old music ever.
What are you talking about? I'm kind of enjoying it.
Oh? It was your taste.
It's actually taking me down a couple levels. Yeah, we ended up last night. Wait, this is on right? Can you
I can hear you.
so last night, so we went to where we go?
Oh, yeah,
I went to Pearson's. We went by. We took my boat, and I forgot about that. I took my boat. So by 11:30 at night, we're all sitting at the bar. Sushi.
yeah. Oh, no.
There's three of us. Me, Tana, and a friend of mine. And it's like some are like, okay, let's go. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
Who drove? Sorry.
Video game.
Swim.
But it was so beautiful out last night. I mean, it was like dead calm. But I didn't realize on my boat that I don't have a big bow spot for that
Oh,
one, which I'm gonna see if I can get one now. But these guys are so busy in town, nobody can do anything.
right.
And I called and asked Wallstrom to send Mike down. Like my favorite mechanic over there. Have him come down. I just wanted to do what's over with my engine. I like to do it like midsummer. Make sure everything's good and tight. And they're like, we have no problem. Sorry. I'm like, 2 weeks now? They're like, it's unbelievable. It's like Steve Ray Vaughan when he was 6 years old. Larry looks like he's ready to pass out.
Let me get on the screen. What am I getting on the screen?
So Andrew's gonna go through YouTube? Is that
That's what he said. I'm not sure. He said he may not. Though we only got 3. I don't know if we're gonna have a 4. I don't think we're gonna have a quorum if they don't show up.
We got a minute. Why don't we just nominate Jeff? What do we need for a quorum in here? 5?
5. Let me see if any PC members through YouTube.
So up in the corner where it says 2 people viewing, does that include you?
No. Yeah, so I asked who,
Mhm.
George Pete. All right, so we will have 5. So we will have a quorum, Jeff. We will have a quorum because George Pete is online. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Who's our,
Our chair,
yeah,
Andy Bowman, and then Jeff Deegan's the vice, right, Jack? Jack Deegan is the vice
they're
chair.
both gone, so we might need to
Appoint.
have somebody nominate somebody to run the meeting tonight.
Cabana.
I do see one potential issue with the minutes. Motion by Deacon, second by Bowman to nominate Bowman.
I don't think he did that, but
I don't think that's how that happened. Right, no.
Also,
we can talk about that.
there wasn't anyone, Jeff Ford wasn't here last week.
Oh, is that?
Say July meetings and stuff. Everybody's got some.
Is that at the very top?
Yeah, looks like no one's participating, but
Where can you find that, Beth?
It's right on the very top. Vice Chairman Ford called the planning commission meeting to order.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's
That's the paragraph nobody reads.
yeah, we'll talk about it when we start the meeting.
yeah, we'll make some corrections there.
George Pete was asking if someone was playing music. It was the phone.
What time are we supposed to start at?
It's supposed to start at 5:30, so there's no chair to call the meeting to order, so I guess I'll just call the meeting to order. We'll start this meeting. And maybe the first agenda item is we have do a roll call, and then we'll have someone nominate someone to be the acting chair. We have no one on the phone right now, but we'll just keep it on just in case someone calls in.
I'm just gonna turn the music down a little.
Yeah. All right, so Mike Naturkis,
Here.
Mary Catherine Hanna,
here?
Andrew Bowman. I don't see Andrew Bowman. Jack Deegan. Mark Boudet. George Pete is here. Beth Raleigh,
Here.
Al Dyka.
Here.
And Lee Kramer, not here. So we do have a quorum. Okay, so the next topic, really quickly, all right, does someone want to nominate someone just to be acting chair for this meeting?
I nominate Miss Cabana.
Since that person does not exist.
I was gonna say, since that person legally doesn't exist in the world, you might want to amend your nomination, Ms. Hannah. but-
Hannah.
I'll second that.
There you go.
Did Lee Kramer just gone?
That's me,
He's
Victor. I should
seconded.
turn off.
Oh, Andy did that, okay. No, it was just Andy,
Oh,
so
okay.
we turn off the music.
Oh, by dialing in, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Thanks.
Smart.
All right, so Mary Catherine Hanna,
Catherine.
do we do a vote? All in
Or
favor?
did somebody second the motion? Al Dyka seconded the motion.
Oh, George Pete nominated Al Dyka to chair, but we already have Mike nominated Mary Catherine Hanna, and Dyka just seconded Mary Catherine Hanna. So is there a, you want to hold a vote on that first motion to nominate Mary Catherine
He knows
Hanna?
more about this
Okay,
commission than I do.
so then all in favor of Mary Catherine Hanna being acting chair for this meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
George Pete? Yay or nay?
He should be able to hear it.
Yeah, this microphone right here. All good. Yep, he says. All right.
All right.
Mary Catherine Hannah, take it over.
So I guess that takes us to approval of the minutes. Do we have any corrections or edits to the minutes?
Jeff Ford wasn't here last week, or last meeting, in the top line.
Right, and did our meeting start at 5:30 or did it start at 6?
Remember, we took a while for people to come.
Okay.
They trickled in, and Lee Kramer had some difficulties accessing the phone, so so it started late.
So we just need to correct vice chairperson to,
Whoever actually called it to
Well, that was
order.
Andrew Bowman who called the meeting to order last time.
was he chair at that point?
No.
He was the vice chair.
That's what I thought. So it would be vice chair Bowman. Okay. Any other edits or corrections?
There's the one other thing that I had noticed was the motion by Deegan in section A, planning commission election. We have a motion by Deegan, second by Bowman to nominate Andrew Bowman. I don't believe Andrew Bowman seconded that, so but we'll look up to see who did second that and we'll make that correction.
Any other edits or corrections? Or motion to approve as amended?
Make that motion. No second.
There is a motion to approve the minutes as amended and second. I'll do a roll call really quick. Mary Catherine Hannah,
Yes.
Al Dyka,
Yes.
Beth Raleigh,
Yes.
Mike Nichurkis,
Yes.
George Pete.
Yes. Can you see it sing?
Yeah, he's,
A little bit of a delay.
sometimes there's a delay, yeah.
Okay.
But we'll wait for that yes for a few more seconds. There we go. Thanks, George.
All right, so I guess that takes us to any public comment or correspondence of something that is not on the agenda tonight.
So something that we thought we'd bring up, and you may have received an email about this from John Cups. There was an email sent out not too long ago, and we have received a couple of emails about this topic over the last couple of days. Last fall, we had an application for a property owner who wanted to put up a large fence wall on their property. And that's come under a lot of scrutiny lately. At the time when that was requested, we had not seen anything like this in Harbor Springs before. And I wanted to make sure that in my review, I addressed it properly. So I did contact Larry Nix and get some feedback from him. And what has been installed or what's in the process of being constructed is a fairly tall wall that surrounds the home. And this is a property that's on the corner of Ann and Fairview. It's a new house that's under construction now.
It's the Puerto Rican house, Puerto Rico house.
Yeah.
And basically through
It's
our
pretty cool in
review
front.
of this, in looking at our zoning code, we have fence and wall restrictions, and that's really designed for fences or walls that are out inside of a setback area closer to a property line. And what this property owner has done is voluntarily moved this wall back so that it meets the principal building setbacks. And that's what's enabled her to construct this wall that's taller than what we would normally do if it was out within the setbacks and being governed by our fence and wall restrictions. And that's garnered quite a bit of feedback from the community. And so if you have heard about this already, that's kind of our explanation of how this has arrived. If you haven't heard about it yet, now you are prepared to, understand and you're not blindsided by that, so. Beth, you had a question?
I think, why does she want it that high?
Well, in speaking with the property owner, the design of that home and the style of the home, it's something that reflects a style of home in like Southern California. She's getting cues from some historical home in that area. I think that's the basis for what she's come up with on this. I can't say for certain because, it's something that the property owner requested. And in our review of the zoning code, I didn't see anything that would, prevent me from approving it. So I had to approve it.
Okay.
It's not what we're used to seeing in Harbor. It's definitely different. So, but just in case anybody,
Do you get the
the conflicting messages.
The conflicting messages.
so anyway, just so that you're aware of that topic, it's been something that has been fairly, there's been a lot of, publicity, I guess, about it. We've had a lot of contact, and John Cups, recently just sent us an email, and he's forwarded it to, I believe, some or most of the planning commission members. So
Some of them, not all of them are on here. Mary Catherine
So I thought that I
Hanna.
would just mention that and, bring everybody up to speed so that everybody, knows what's going on and, what has brought us to this point. So. But that's all I have for public correspondence.
Anything else for public comment or correspondence?
Going to the YouTube. Anything for public correspondence from YouTube? Andy Bowman's here.
Or who is joining us?
So I guess that then takes us to new and old business and the master plan update. So I will turn it over to whoever is leading that agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Larry Nix. I'm the planning consultant for the city of Harbor Springs. And tonight, my main task is to provide an educational session for planning commission members regarding the laws and regulations and process of preparing a master plan. Since we have 4 new planning commission members on the planning commission, and others that have not been through the master plan process before on the planning commission, staff thought it would be reasonable to take a little bit of time and have this session so we can flush out questions or comments or just general understanding of how this whole idea of a master plan works here in the city of Harbor Springs. So I have several pages of an outline that I put together based on the other information you got ahead of the meeting. And I'm going to be talking from the outline that's headed up nuts and bolts of planning and zoning. This I prepared for the city for today's session. So the overview of planning and zoning as it starts out, there's general objectives of what a master plan needs to do. One, it needs to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the community in general. 2, it must regulate the orderly development of property in appropriate locations and relationships to each other. 3, it must also avoid the overcrowding of population. And that's all relevant to where you are, because Harbor Springs is a lot different than New York City or Detroit. And these are universal sort of objectives that are stated in the statute. And 4 is to facilitate the adequate provision of systems of public services to include transportation, such as roads, utilities, such as water and sewer, education, such as schools, and recreation, which is parks and bike paths and trails and playing fields. The authority that the city of Harbor Springs has for this is really granted to them from the state of Michigan in the general law. There are 2 laws that deal with this topic. One is the Zoning Enabling Act, and the second one is the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. The zoning ordinance itself is a law. It is a legal set of regulations to enact the state's police powers that allows us to do that. And the states have the power to regulate activity to promote public health, safety, and general welfare, and they have given that to us as a local municipality to do it the way we see fit here in the city of Harbor Springs. As I stated, the city of Harbor Springs has no inherent authority to do this on their own, but it's a power granted to the city, as is every municipality in the state of Michigan by the state of Michigan. And we cannot go beyond what the state says that we can do under the law. So the law has a threshold, the state does in their regulations. That's also tempered by a lot of court decisions that the state has made, and some federal decisions, but not so many generally, but usually here in the state of Michigan. And that provides us with the umbrella of zoning and regulations and master planning that we can do here. If you have any questions as we go through this, please ask. Okay, because your questions are probably more important than what I have to say, because you may have questions that I may be making points that are confusing, and if I can help clarify those to you, that's why we're doing this today. The relationship between the master plan and the zoning ordinance, there's a statutory mandate for in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. We can't really talk about master planning without talking about zoning, because there's a strong relationship between those two entities. In Section 203 of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires that a zoning ordinance shall be based upon a plan that, one, promotes the health, safety, and welfare, encourages the use of land in accordance with their character and adaptability. It limits the improper use of land, non-conformities, if you will. It's conserve natural resources and energy. Meet the needs of the state's residents' food and fiber and other natural resources, places of residence, recreation, industry, trade, service, and other uses of land. It avoids the overcrowding of population. These are all things that your master plan needs to address in one form or another, as they're appropriate here in the city. Provide adequate light and air. As an example, that's what we're talking about there is side yard setbacks, the height of buildings, rear front yard setbacks. That's how the courts have defined over time, providing adequate light and air, the space between structures. Lessen congestion on the public roads and streets, reduce hazards to life and property, facilitate adequate provision of system of transportation, sewage disposal, safe and adequate water supply, education, recreation, and other public requirements. And 2, conserve the expenditure of funds for public improvements and services to conform with the most advantageous uses of land and properties. But within those parameters, there's a lot of latitude that the city can invoke. Those are pretty broad statements, and we understand that. And that's why when we go through this process, we have to form and shape the document that addresses those topics as they're appropriate, and at the same time have something that means something here to the city of Harbor Springs for the organization and future use of land within this community. The differences between a zoning ordinance and a master plan. The zoning ordinance is a set of regulations. How many feet you have to sit back from the road right of way, how much off the property line, how tall you can be, what type of use you can have on a piece of land. Those are zoning regulations, where a fence can be placed, how tall that fence can be. Those are rules, those are regulations. A master plan is a overarching document that is a guide. It's not rules at all, but it's a policy statement indicating what you would like to see, what the city would like to see over a 20-year period, is what the statute actually talks about, for your planning period of how you want to see the city change, or what should be maintained and what should be adjusted, or what kind of issues that need to be addressed That's what the planning process is. And as we've talked before, is the statute today indicates that if you have a 20-year plan or longer, that every 5 years, you have to go through a process of reviewing the plan to make sure it's still relevant and on target. Most communities don't go through a major renovation every 5 years, but rather they may tweak a few things because, well, we've done that when we've done that, and so we can drop that out, let's add a few other things to it. Or, we tried that when that's not gonna happen, so let's push that to the side and take it out of the plan and maybe put something else in it. So there's adjustments that need to be made to the plan, potentially every 5 years or so. If there's things that are starting to go on in your community that the community thinks that need to occur, that the master plan doesn't address, or even your zoning ordinance doesn't address, the proper way to handle something like that is just not change, in this instance, the zoning code, but also adjust the master plan simultaneously so we keep those two documents in sync. That has never happened here in the city. I have been involved in situations where that has happened, and it's very important to keep your master plan and your zoning ordinance and zoning code in sync, so there's a solid foundation for the basis of those zoning decisions we make through making adjustments that are appropriate in our master plan. So the law has the Michigan Planning Enabling Act has a very specific section in it that talks about the master plan content. It's section 33, and I've provided it to you, and I'm going to kind of briefly just kind of scoot over these because it's a long section and we're all smart and I know we can read. Basically, the first part of that, and I'm on page 3 of the handout, a master plan shall address land use and infrastructure issues and may project 20 years or more into the future. And that includes text and analysis and maps and graphs and charts and everything that you need to have at your disposal as part of that master plan. And topics that has to be included in that are as are pertinent to your community. It's not that you have to have all of these, but you need to make sure that what's in there is in fact pertinent to the city of Harbor Springs. The general location, character, and extent of the components of a transportation system. Now, we generally have streets, we have sidewalks, and we're starting to get more trails in the community. There is no public transportation that I know of anyways. It's been talked about, we have a ferry service now. It's kind of private, it's not public though. But it is a transportation system that moves people from Harbor Springs over to Bay Harbor to Petoskey and then back. It's kind of a triangular circuit that was just started this summer. So that's interesting. Waterways and waterfront developments, that's certainly applicable here. Sewer and water supply systems, that's certainly applicable as we have those. Facilities for flood prevention, we've just had a major improvement there. Drainage, pollution prevention, and maintenance of water levels. Somehow they didn't put a plug or a cork in the bottom of Lake Michigan, so we can lower that from time to time, but we certainly have a lot of that water. Public utilities and structures, and we have an electric company here. We sell electricity to our city service area. The plan also has to contain recommendations to character and layout of redevelopment or rehabilitation of blighted areas, and removal and relocation of how those have to happen and what we're going to do with those. Now, we don't have a lot of blight here in the city. Can't think of many places that are downtrodden. We certainly have different levels of housing though within this community. But that's something we need to look at and address, this housing, and just are there areas in the city that need attention, that need public help as part of this master planning effort. And because we do have a zoning ordinance, we have to have a zoning plan as part of our master plan. And we need, that's a very generalized development. And generally what we do with that, because we've had a zoning code so long, and master plan so long, is that becomes a kind of a chart of how our current zoning classifications and the ideas contained in the master plan, where they would really fit with one another, to keep those in keeping with one another. I'm not sure we have a street master plan in the city of Harbor Springs. I guess I have never seen one. I know we have a state highway that runs through, and everything else is pretty much a local street here in the city. But if we end up with a street master plan as part of this, we have to talk about how that's, if any, in cooperation with the County Road Commission or the State Transportation Department, of how those ideas will interrelate with those agencies. So, and then there's any questions about that content of a master plan?
So George Pete has a question on YouTube, says, can you adjust master plans at any time?
You can adjust the master plan, but there's a process for doing that. The process is the Planning Commission adopts or develops a master plan. It in turn then goes to the City Council for authorization for distribution. And then it gets distributed to the local jurisdictions that are adjacent to us, the county and the regional planning agency. There's a 63-day wait period for comments. Once those come in, the Planning Commission has the ability to consider those comments and make any adjustments as necessary. And then you schedule a public hearing. And their public notice is published in the general newspaper, general circulation here in town. There's no individual notices that go out, but it's just in the local newspaper. Planning Commission holds a public hearing, they take public comment, and then they can have the ability to adopt the master plan or make any adjustments to it based on public input, or they can table any decision to make those adjustments to the final document. Once the Planning Commission has adopted the master plan, it then gets pushed up to the City Council, because in this instance, the City of Harbor Springs has exercised their authority to also adopt the master plan as a city council, as a legislative body. And then they take it under advisement and look at the public information and either approve the master plan, or if they disagree with it, they can remand it back to the Planning Commission for adjustment and reconsideration. I have been involved in a few of those, and that's no fun, because one of them took over a year between the legislative body and the Planning Commission to finally come to grips with what they were going to do, because they wouldn't sit down together and talk. But they kept bouncing this master plan back and forth, and that was a very awkward situation. So that happened. That's a procedural process, though. But
George Pete says,
asked a good question.
he says, understood, thanks.
Okay, we're talking about that, right?
I don't know.
Very
Well,
good.
it just, I mean, it brings up a point, which is that if the recommendation is that you make sure that your master plan and your zoning code are in sync, and you make changes to your zoning code that are no longer in sync with your master plan, going back and amending your master plan sounds like quite a process. So better to wait for your 5-year reviews to do that, or is it better to review it every year and just kind of keep a list of changes anyway? Something to think about. Okay.
That's something that does happen. There are some municipalities in the wintertime will take a meeting and just, let's talk about our master plan this meeting instead of not having one. And just, is there anything going on that would cause us to take note in our master plan that we should adjust, or should we put something on a list for that 5-year review that we make sure we don't miss? Communities do that, and that's one of those slow months. So
Could you give an example of something that might, or that has come up that you had to discuss,
in terms of, it's
problems with the master plan?
probably, well, it usually comes out in a zoning ordinance first, not in the master plan. Because the zoning ordinances are the rules and regulations. This goes back a long time ago, but when many storage facilities became popular, many, many years ago, most zoning ordinances didn't deal with that topic. And so municipalities dealt with, what is this? Is this a commercial use? Is this an industrial use? And they'd go to their master plan, and their master plan didn't address the issue either. In a lot of instances, the planning commission of the local unit put the two topics together and amended the master plan and simultaneously amended the zoning ordinance. So those two documents were in sync as to this industrial use, because most of the communities designated those mini storage facilities as an industrial type of property, as opposed to a commercial type of property. And so they did. Some municipalities amended the zoning ordinance first, and then years later amended their master plan, and with the hopes that nobody would challenge that rezoning of the property to allow for mini storage facilities. And there's other uses, situations that occur that this new uses pop up. We don't have that too frequently here in the city, but in more rural or suburban areas, those things have occurred over time.
Thank you.
Does that help? Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Online questions?
Nope.
Okay. The relationship between a planning commission and the zoning board of appeals is very important. The planning commission, generally, they meet 4 times a year, required. We meet usually monthly here in the city. Sometimes we'll miss a meeting because there's nothing to do, but that's not too frequent. Planning commission is responsible for holding public hearings, developing and adopting a master plan, recommend, and after the public hearing, they recommend to the legislative body, the city council, the adoption of zoning ordinance and map, and all the text and map city board members and amendments for rezoning. We hold public hearings on special land uses and plan unit developments. Planning commission reviews site plans that are specified in the zoning ordinance and adopt rules for our transaction of business, basically our bylaws. The zoning board of appeals, because we have this book of rules, that not all property owners with what they want to do can comply with those rules. Maybe their lot's too small, or maybe there's a large crevice in the backyard, or there's a big bluff in the backyard. And so those rules that we have for those zoning districts and where they're located just don't work. And so there has to be a body by state statute that allows for consideration of bending those rules or giving a variance to that property owner. They want to put an addition on their house. They can't meet the side yard setback because of physical locational characteristics generally, or the rule just doesn't work, and they can take their case to the zoning board of appeals. So the board of appeals is the only group body in the city that can bend the zoning rules, generally speaking. There are some exceptions, but not generally. The front yard, side yard, rear yard setbacks, the height of a building, those are the kind of rules that the zoning board of appeals generally will hear variances to. So the planning commission makes the rules, city council adopts the rules, and the zoning board of appeals, if you will, can break the rules or bend them a little bit for good cause. And one of the things that most planners like myself, we see very frequently is that if you have a very liberal zoning board of Appeals group and will grant a variance because they like them or like her, the applicant, is it really undermines, why do I even have rules here in the city? So the zoning board of appeals is really a very important group of people because they can really set the tenor for how the public views the rules and regulations here in the city. It's important. The planning commission has to be very cognizant of the type of rules they make. Are these realistic or are these unrealistic for the zone district we're talking about, whether it's the R1 or R1A or R1E here in the city, or the commercial rules or industrial rules, that we can't make them so stringent that we are driving people to the zoning board of appeals all the time. City council must make those same kind of decisions. That these rules the planning commission provided us, are they realistic? Do they make sense? And thus the zoning board of appeals has to take their job, and I know they do, very seriously about how and when they need to grant a variance or a foundation for that. Comments, questions?
None.
Something we don't do very often here, because we are, in fact, a mature city, is rezoning of property. Going from one zone district to another. We generally find a lot of this in rural areas or suburban areas where the master plan has an area mapped out for single-family residential, but the zoning map may have, in fact, a lot of that area as rural residential or agricultural. So the master plan is indicating we want residential growth in this area of the community, but the zoning map hasn't quite caught up with it yet because they don't want to open up all of that land all at once, because they are encouraging the logical extension of sewer and water services and storm drainage services. So they give it on an incremental basis and a logical basis to encourage the logical development of utilities. Now, we pretty much are 100% served with utilities here in the city. I'm sure there's pockets here and there that aren't served, or some of the outlying areas, but I'm pretty much convinced that most of the areas that are going to develop have utilities available to them, or close to them. So rezoning is such a big issue. Sometimes if the master plan indicates that the central business district here in the city wants to expand, and so we designate in the master plan an area where the downtown area could expand, the CBD area. Well, that's going to encroach into a residential area as everything is built out. And I'm not saying that may or will happen. It's just an example I'm providing. So please don't anybody crucify me or send me hateful email like, where are you going to do this at? Okay, this is just an example. And so we may not want to initially rezone property that the master plan says is going to be used for commercial sometime in the future. We may set up in the master plan kind of a series of conditions that would set forth that would have to happen before we would really consider that rezoning also. So that's where the master plan and the zoning ordinance can play hand in hand and work together.
Right, but that's where the master plan is, that visioning document. If you know, theories about how and why and where you put certain uses, combinations of uses have changed, and if we feel like that has changed here, we might make that policy statement in the master plan and then work the zoning code over time to implement those changes.
Yes, yes. And if we have conditions by which that area would develop, you know, maybe it's the development of a road or the extension of utilities or a type of housing if we want to see in that area, would be conditions in which we would look to review when we were considering that rezoning of that land from one district to another to accommodate with the master plans is encouraging. So,
We have a
yes.
question from George Pete. If the
Yes.
zoning board grants a variance, does that have to be approved by council or does it just stand?
It is approved by the zoning board of appeals and it stands. It does not go to a higher being. If someone disagrees with the decision made by the zoning board of appeals, they can appeal that decision to circuit court. But in the first instance, the reason they go to the zoning board of appeals is because the zoning administrator has said, you can't do what you want to do. You need to bend the rule and go to the zoning board of appeals. So the applicant, if you will, has a local way to change the rules before he has to go into the legal system.
Larry, I was talking about Jeff with this a little bit earlier, actually. So what if zoning administrator approves something, but someone else doesn't like that? Do they have any, like a neighbor or someone down the street? And we were thinking about the fence, but we were just wondering.
If they're considered an aggrieved party and are directly affected by that zoning administrator's decision, they have the right to file an appeal, which stays the process of the applicant being able to do anything until the zoning board of appeals hears that appeal.
So who makes the determination that they're a aggrieved party in this case?
It would be the zoning board
The
of
zoning,
appeals.
okay.
Yes. Any other questions, thoughts? I told you this wasn't gonna last that long. I didn't want to bore you with all details, but we would come out with questions, so which is good. I'm not sure I need to go through this, how to run an effective meeting. This is the sixth item I have here. And actually, it's the last item. Basically, we have the Open Meetings Act. Let me just kind of brush through the highlights of this. They're applicable to you, the planning commission, the city council, any board or commission here in the city, or any other municipality. We can't meet in secret. Okay, all discussions, all decisions must be made in public, at a public meeting. If we have a work session, it's a public meeting. Okay, it falls under that whole category. Things we have to be careful of. If you end up in a social gathering, end up in a restaurant, and there's a quorum of the planning commission there, or city council, or zoning board of appeals, is that a meeting? It is not a meeting. It's just by coincidence, a gathering. Can you talk business? No, you should not. You should not make decisions. You shouldn't talk about an issue, a site plan, a pending application when you're in those social situations. It's not appropriate. You should not engage, or you shouldn't let an applicant bend your ear too much. I know it's hard to do. It's a small town. I run into this all the time. But we know each other. You know, my kids went to school with their kids. We go to church together. So I try not to politely, professionally say it's an inappropriate discussion. I can't have this. I'm not going to say a word about it. And if they persist, you might just want to, I got to go, thank you, and turn around and walk away. It's not easy, especially with people you know. But sometimes you have to do it. So the law is very clear about this, is that your decisions, your deliberation needs to be done in a public meeting. Okay? You can go to a site and look at it and view it. And if the owner happens to come out and want to engage you, you have to, again, politely tell them, it's ex parte communication. I can't have this with you. We need to have this a conversation in public so everybody can hear it from the planning commission on that topic.
Larry, there was
Yes,
a
sir.
question, a follow-up question from George, not to cut this section a little short, but about the ZBA. Does an aggrieved party need to be notified of the decision prior to execution?
Say that one again, the question.
Does an aggrieved party need to be notified of the decision prior to execution? I'm assuming,
Before they, if they, no, they would not. If I understand the question correctly, if the zoning board of appeals is gonna make a decision, I think what George is asking is, does the aggrieved party, if they don't happen to be there at the meeting, do they need to be made aware of what they're gonna do before the decision? And the answer to that is no. Is no.
back to public process.
Anything else? Public hearings themselves. A public hearing is the process we invite people specifically within 300 feet of an area, if it's site specific, to come out and talk to us and provide their opinion. Anybody in the community, because there's also a notification in the newspaper. And it's not an argument, it's not a discussion generally, but it's the person in the public has an opinion, they share it with you. Sometimes it comes as an opinion, sometimes it comes as a whole series of questions. And it's always been my advice to my clients, do not engage in a discussion or a question and answer period with a public comment. They have questions. I generally tell planning commissions, make notes, okay? And when all the public comments are done, you as a planning commission may sit in your deliberation and talk about those comments. And if you had any questions regarding a clarification or what somebody had said, through the chairperson, you can ask that person in the audience to clarify that point or to expound upon it. But you should not, during the public hearing process, engage in banter back and forth. You should also not let a person, an applicant, the ability to walk up and, well, Mary Catherine, we'll see right over here where I got this over here. So you and the applicant are having a conversation by example. Not that you would ever do that. And poor Mike sitting on the other end of the room, he's over there scratching his head. I wonder what they're talking about, because he's not part of the discussion. And because the applicant and Mary Catherine got into a discussion back and forth, but he wanted to point out to her. All right, and that's where the chairperson has to say, stop, go back to your podium or where you're sitting, and if you want to explain to the whole group what's going on and what your concern is, that's fine. If the chairperson wants to do that, if they want to engage in that kind of discussion, or if you would encourage the chairperson to want to do that. So, because those relationships all need to really work through the chairperson to the audience. Because the worst thing to have happen is we have 9 planning commission members, and they're all trying to have discussions with somebody in the audience. And being on a conference phone call like that is so hard to do, because you can't hear anything. So the minute taker goes a little crazy too.
And Larry, can I just make a note about
Yeah.
something a little earlier, about communication between planning commission members? I mean, the phone wasn't around when the planning commission, when this act was really around as relevant. So you don't want to text other planning commission members or board members, oh, this is what I think, because that's technically a communications during that's not being held during a public process. So just anyway, that's something, a word of caution. I've had that happen to me in other jobs, so.
Yes. Everybody understand that? Any electronic communications is discoverable. Texting, emailing, however, voicemails, they can be discovered. A friend of mine is a forensic computer analyst. And he goes, it's amazing what you can find in a computer when you're asked to. his knowledge. And people think they erase things. No, they don't. They're there. So
So,
be careful with those electronic means of communication.
Larry, we got a question from Andy Bowman on YouTube. Is it appropriate for the planning commission to request that members of the public provide their name and place of residence? Is this applicable to both people present in person, on the phone, or online? And I'll speak to my experience for council is there's nothing in the Open Meetings Act that requires people to sign in to attend a meeting. But if you're going to participate, the commission, and I believe the council can set rules for participation, which includes stating your name. But I don't know, Larry, if you want to expand on that.
Well, I always find it necessary, and I don't think I've ever had a client that didn't require that. And it's part of the bylaws generally that a person who's going to address the body, the planning commission, they need to state their name and address. You know, that person may know every single one of you sitting up there. All right, but for the record keeper may not know who that person in the audience is. So for them to accurately record what they're saying and capture it, they need to know who made it. Because when we go back in the record and look at what's going on, we know who said what during the process of the meeting.
Larry, I have a follow-up question to that, and that is, what Harbor Springs being a small city, we tend to get a lot of, not all meetings, but this happens at council, sometimes at planning commission, people who don't live in the city limits come to comment on a topic, they'll be from the township. And do they have an equal say, or should they have an equal say as city residents in their public discussion part or the public hearing part?
They are citizens. It doesn't say resident public comment,
Mhm.
or you have to be a taxpayer public comment. It says public comments. So whether you're a city resident, you live in a different state, you live in a different country, or you live in the township, everybody has an equal say of their opinion. Now, I know from experience, the body or board hearing that may give it differing weights because they know the people. Okay, well, that person's only here twice a year, for 10 days, okay? All right, fine, thank you. And they give that a weighting system internally. I can't stop that.
Mhm.
All right, but everybody here has an equal say to participate and an equal right to participate. Okay? It's up to the body who's hearing it as to how much weight they put to it, or does it even make sense or not?
Just to look back to Andrew to make sure that we got the last piece of this would be that appropriate both online, on the phone, and in person, and I would say yes.
I would say, so right now under the governor's extended executive order for participation remotely, yes. Once the governor stops that and it's not required that we allow people to participate remotely, I think the board and commission can create its own rules for whether or not they want to treat someone who's, this is just me talking, on the phone or YouTube, their comments as if they were in person. With the COVID situation, the governor's order says, yes, you have to let them participate remotely if you are letting everyone else participate remotely. So I don't know, Larry, if you have any follow-up to that, but that was just be my thoughts there.
That's appropriate.
So I think the board would have to determine, do we want to accept public comment on the phone like 5 years from now, right? COVID's gone, hopefully, and we're still letting people participate electronically, but do we want them to view and listen, but do we want them to also comment like they are right now?
Right.
So, yeah. Andrew says, thank you, very helpful.
Okay, good, thank you. Probably one of the most, I'm just hitting highlights, especially public input situations. Handling angry and emotional people at a public hearing. We generally haven't had too much of that here. I've seen the room, for the most part, professional and maybe get a little emotional, but never get hostile. I've seen a fight break out. I've seen a sheriff come in. No, at other places.
Oh.
I've been doing this for 45 years all over, so I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a sheriff come in and empty your room. Okay, I've seen a lot of things. But the best way I've ever found to handle someone who's getting very emotional and getting upset because you're not engaging that person with discussion back and forth, which is what they want to do. They want to get in an argument. And you're smart enough to know, I don't go there. Larry told me, don't go there. And he's right, I'm not going there because that guy's big or she's really angry or something. And the best way to handle that is, thank you. I appreciate your comments. Is there anything else you would like to add that's different? And no, I think I've said everything I need to say. And they sit down. It's when you take a very calm and direct approach with them, they generally respond to that. I've seen a couple of situations where they don't, then you have to get a little more forceful. The other situation is people get up and they say the same thing repeatedly. You know, we don't want that development. It's too much traffic, it's too much noise, it's too much of this or that and the other. And you generally always try to avoid having the public take a vote. How many people here agree with that kind of a situation? They raise their hands. Okay. I generally like to say, if you'd like to make a comment regarding something that somebody else has already said, go up, identify yourself, and say, I agree with Joe's comment. Okay, thank you. And so if they want to get on the record for saying that, that's an appropriate way to do it, as opposed to everybody getting up and saying the same thing over and over and over again. Just, I agree with Joe's comment or Mary's comment. So, any thoughts or questions? The last thing I want-
Wait, we got one from Andy Bowman.
Okay, Andy.
Are you correct in asking members of the public to address their comments to the commission and not to other members of the audience? Avoid crosstalk, correct?
No, that is very correct. Yes, all comments made from the public need to be directed to the planning commission or the chair, not to the applicant or other members in the audience. Good point, Andrew. My final thought, after we've been through this terrible public hearing, lots of emotions, is the decision process you have to go through, which is you deliberate, talk about all the points that were made. You get those clarified if you need to, and you just can't make a motion, we approve this. I go crazy, because my next thing is, okay, what happens if I have to defend this? What's the basis and foundation for that? Is when you make a motion, have reasons why you're going to say I approve or I did not. What's being asked for. You know, it doesn't comply with this. We had, you know, this was too intense. The screening wasn't proper. Whatever, or it complies with all the sections of the zoning ordinance. But you got to have a rationale and a reason why you're doing what you're doing. You got to create that record. It's one of the reasons I write the reports that I do, and I provide to you the analysis, the background, the facts, and then I put in my conclusion, my recommendation for your consideration. I'm just your advisor. That's what my role is, to advise you as to what could happen. Most of the time, I get it pretty close. I failed a few times in my career, but you know, Mom said I wasn't perfect when I was born, so I guess I keep working on that. But it is, or you modify a little bit what I recommend. But it's always important to have those reasons why. Because when I provide you with a suggestion, I always have reasons why I'm suggesting it to you to approve or deny. So.
Larry, Andy has another question for you, and is it, will Victor read anything I type? This could be fun.
Only if appropriate, Andrew.
I guess I have to, since it's a commissioner that's speaking.
So that kind of master plan, how it relates to zoning and the zoning board of appeals and planning commission and the city council, the public hearing process, the public input process, motions, reasons, rationale. Questions or thoughts? I guess coming back a little bit then to the master plan. The master plan is a document that has a series of sections in it. One section is background analysis. The people, the economy, the land, the soils, the roads, the water, the utility systems, everything that makes up this city and how we got to where we are today. Another section is a statement of goals. Where do we want to go? What are those broad statements by general category, whether it's natural resources or the economy or housing or commercial or industrial or recreation? Okay, those statements, and then the statement of objectives. And then another part of the plan is, well, how does that look physically? And how do we describe that? So it's the future land use. You know, we want residences over here, we want commercial, we want industrial. And if you will, that's going to be the easiest part of this plan because I haven't seen that change in 30 years. And I'm not sure it's changed much in the last 50 years in this town because those patterns of land use that are well established in this town. Now, there's going to be little nuances, I think, in a lot of those areas about adjustments of situations that we need to address in the plan. And then the last part of the plan is implementation strategy. How do we get there from here? What do we need to do to accomplish what we want to see happen over the next 20 years? Those major sections covers everything the law talks about. But there's one element, though, that the law really doesn't talk about that I think is really, really important, and that's public participation. And it comes in many forms. It could come in a survey, it could come in open meetings, it could come in futuring sessions where you get interest groups together and you have discussions for public input. We've been through several of those in town over the years. We did one in the downtown area several years ago that I thought was very effective, and it came out, a lot of ideas came out, and a lot of things were implemented. We call it wayfinding and directional signs in town. Were a good outcome of that downtown session that they held many years ago. But that's a very important element, and that's something we have to, I think staff needs to kind of make a recommendation to you, given the COVID situation that we have going and the spacing that we need. It's going to be hard to get 50 people in this room and have a good discussion. We got to be 6 feet apart. That's just not going to happen. Or go to the high school gymnasium and try to do it. People aren't going to be comfortable. So we have, staff, I think, is going to have to get together and come up with a better way of creating a tire.
I will have to say to that comment is that lately the surveys we've been giving out on our website have been seeing 150, 200, 250 responses from people. So I think if we use those online surveys, I mean, you're not going to capture everyone if you can, but get them to the right people so they can distribute to their their networks. It'll be it's not the best way, but given the circumstances, I think we can make it work as a planning commission.
Well, and I think you do some open houses where you stretch them out over longer periods of time, which gives people more opportunity to come in and out. And you use the high school gym or you use Holy Childhood as a space or something like that. I think there are lots of ways to accomplish the goal. So, which I guess kind of brings me to what I kind of have been wanting in the last couple of months as we've been talking about this is that work plan or a proposed work plan. Like we've talked about this, we've talked about the elements, we've talked about the things that need to go into it. So like, when do we start? Well, where's the work plan? And this meeting, we're gonna handle these two sections, and this meeting, we're gonna handle these two sections. And we're planning that we would like to have public hearings and public input during these 6 weeks period. I mean, I'm really feeling like we need to move forward with that piece of this.
Well, we have moved forward because we did have a fairly good discussion. Maybe we need to do it again for those first 43 pages, all that background. We got a lot of input out of you, the planning commissioners, about what should happen with that section of the plan. And I'm not sure, do we want to redo that section, that discussion again?
In some ways, I think it's easier if work starts, right? Because when you have a blank slate, it's really hard. So you're
Yes.
like, well, I don't know, I suppose we could go to the moon. Whereas if you have something that you're actually working off of, that is often really helpful for people in
Sure.
terms of then having comments and inputs. Well, I really like this and I don't like that. Makes it easier. That would be my opinion. But certainly we have lots of new planning commission members, so it might be worth at least a recap of that discussion. And that's those first 43 pages. I don't know if you guys had a really chance to dive into the master plan, scintillating document. It's all the soils and all the background information. And we've talked about moving to appendices rather than being in the heart of the master. Okay.
Okay.
What are you suggesting? That they redo what you've already done?
Well, so we started a discussion and we took the first 43 pages of the master plan, which is all of the background information. It describes our community. It talks about the soils and the water table and when town was developed and the history and all that kind of stuff, and talked about things that we saw in there that might need to get updated, that might need to get changed, that might need to get expanded. So the question is, given the fact that we have additional planning commissioner members now, we have a very different planning commission than we did when we had that discussion. Should we redo that discussion and get more input into it now, or wait until staff has had a chance to do something with the comment they've already gotten and then get additional input?
It seems like we can read it on our own. It seems like it would be going backwards when you want to go get the job done.
Right, I agree with you. I would trust the people that were here before. They were all good people. They knew these plans and all that. Oh, we don't have to redo that. You know, let's staff rewrite it from those comments that they had and move forward.
Yes.
Yep, and Andrew Bowman says, I would be in favor of continuing the process of reviewing in segments, identifying the areas that need revision, public input, and scheduling public work sessions or surveys that address the needs we've identified. Makes sense? So to me, that makes sense. So I guess what I'm getting some direction from, a couple commission members here is to, let's create a more detailed work plan so we know you're never going to get the exact date when we're going to have a specific meeting, but just generally this is the order that we can expect things to happen within a year or a year and however long it takes.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's a good strategy. And I think staff, we can work on that over the next, maybe in the next week, we can present that because we have another planning commission meeting next Thursday. We have 2 items primary on that. Maybe we could take 10 minutes at the end of that meeting and have a discussion about next steps in the master planning
Right, just sort
process.
of approve the work plan
Yeah.
would be good, because then we can really start diving into it and implementing it. I'm anxious to get to the sections, that actually have stuff that we want to talk about, the cool stuff, the
Oh.
fun stuff.
You're not the only one, trust me. Everybody's anxious for those,
Yes,
but I like to get the boring stuff out of the way first too.
which is good, and we talked about that, so I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, good. All right, I have nothing further to present to you about master planning, zoning, and process and stuff. I just wanted to provide an overview, hit the nuts and bolts, if you will. And I told you in my memo that it wasn't going to last more than 90 minutes, and it's 70 minutes right now, so we're good. I'm meeting my goal, so.
And these are great materials in the front, so I would highly encourage people to look at them if they haven't already, and
And hopefully you like the three-ring notebook. That's not my idea. That was Jeff's and Victor's idea. I'm not sure if it was Victor, but I know Jeff did. And Andrew is helping, and Andy is helping with the coordination of making sure that if I produce something that I want it to go into the notebook, I make sure he gets it. So we're coordinating things and getting there. So keep that handy. If you can't sleep at night, just pick that up and start reading. Okay, put a bookmark in it because it's stimulating. Okay.
Yeah.
We
5
started,
minutes later, you'll be soft right now.
we started talking about some various other documents that could be provided that had some details. One of them specifically that we talked about was something that would specifically identify what has to be in a master plan. And that third document in here is something that the MSU extension put together that just kind of cuts right down through, here are the items and here's the section of the Michigan Planning and Enabling Act that specifies that. And that was something that was requested and so that we provided, we figured, or I thought, just getting a 3-ring binder with some of these documents, we could put it all in to have for you guys. You can bring it to the meeting or not. All of these items that are in this 3-ring binder and that we've been doing, we're also putting on a special page on the website. So when you go to the home page, right at the top of the page, there's a thing that says master plan review. Andy has set that up
Victor,
for
can you
us.
show that?
Hmm?
Victor, can you show that, with that on our webpage there?
Yep.
It's right on the home page. It's up at the very top. And basically when you go to that right now, there's not a lot of detail there, but there is a link to each of these documents in PDF form. I will get together and put together maybe a little paragraph or something kind of explaining the process that we're doing. But all these documents will be on that website. So if you lose the book, or if you don't have the book with you and you want to review, it's all there. Also for anybody in the public that wants to follow what we're doing, it will be there for them as well.
And we got a couple comments, and actually, Jeff, you had just answered John Leo's question, which was, will there be a 3-ring binder for non-planning commission members to review? This will be a valuable tool to refer to. Jeff said that all this information is on the website on a special master planning 2020 webpage. Lee Kramer says, thank you, Larry. Thank you, one and all. And Andrew Bowman says, I agree with John Leo. So, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have physical copies as well if people come visit, to have those
Yeah.
available, but yeah, it's on the website too.
I'll have a spare 3-ring binder for the office if anybody wants to come in and review, but then if anybody wants to print out copies for themselves at home or any public people, it's there in a PDF for people to review.
Do all the planning commissioners know where that thing is on the website, the homepage?
Yep, I showed it to them up
Okay,
here.
very good. I get all kinds of questions all the time about stuff that's right on the front page.
Did we just set a special meeting schedule, or do we actually, are we going meeting by meeting? And I apologize, I don't recall.
We've been going meeting by meeting, and right now, from what I'm hearing, is we need to have a work plan, a more detailed outline, and I totally concur. And hopefully, we can get that done to you by next Thursday. Try to get it to you ahead of time, so you can look at it and digest it a little bit. And then from there, we kind of set the first Thursday of the month, we'll hold a master plan meeting if necessary. Now, the 4th of July kind of goofed us up a little bit for this one.
That's what I thought I
It
remembered.
pushed it off.
Kind of identified.
It was the first Thursday of the month, and there may be Thursdays we won't meet. I don't like to meet if we really don't have anything to do, okay, neither do you. But if we have something and it's substantive, and we can get it to you ahead of time, because we want your input, it's valuable, then we'll get it to you, we'll get that meeting, and hopefully we can get everyone here or participating to review that information and provide the input we need and that feedback. So remember, it's your master plan, representing the city. So Madam's standing and acting chair, back to you.
All right. I think that concludes everything that is on the agenda. We do have on here to set a date for the next master plan review, which tentatively is August 6th. Do we want to leave that as a date or wait and see what the work plan lays out for us?
Well, it's tentative, is leave it, I will suggest, and they're easier to cancel than to get it on your calendar sometimes.
Okay. Any other member comments? Okay. And I guess I would take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I guess we are adjourned. Fabulous.
Well done. Perfect.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
All right. If you have any questions about anything that come up later, if you want to email me or Jeff or Victor, please do so.
Even though it's post-meeting, Andy Bowman says 8/6 works for him, August 6th, so.
All right.
So does Lee.
Bye.
Andy says good night.
Goodbye. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.